I'm your host, Dino Watt, and get ready to be inspired as you learn exactly how to own your role. Hey, everybody, welcome to Own Your Role, the podcast that helps you connect with unique entrepreneurs. And I'm excited to have you here again this day for a really cool conversation, especially for those of you that have been listening to the show for a while or have ever seen me speak on stages. You know, I talk about how I am deficient of the sports gene, meaning I just don't watch a lot of sports. I never played a whole bunch of sports. You know me, I'm a performer, I'm a dancer. I like that type of stuff, but I always do use sports analogies and ideas inside of my speeches. And I find it fascinating the discipline it takes for somebody to be in sports. And today we have JR Butler, on that is going to share with us how his company has helped people shift from that world of sports into a career. And I find it fascinating because I've always thought about that. I see these elite athletes who have been focused on one thing for the majority of their life. And when that either comes to an end or it doesn't pan out the way that they thought it was going to pan out, what do they do next? So our conversation is going to be a lot around that and about what JR and his company does there. Before we get into that, again, thank you so much for listening to the show, for subscribing. For those of you that have subscribed, you know, it's the best way to help us let Spotify and Apple and all the big podcast companies know that they want to rank us a little higher because you're subscribing. So thank you for subscribing and for sharing it with your friends and colleagues and letting them know that there's something to be learned on these shows. So continue to do so. If you haven't subscribed, that's my plea to you to subscribe so that you can actually be alerted when we are adding a new podcast, which we do just about every week. So again, thank you for being here. With that being said, let's get started with the show. JR, again, thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited about our conversation today.
Me too. Yeah, very, very excited, Dino. Let's jump in.
Let's do it. Let's talk a little bit about, as we always do on this show, we start off with the story because I think story is the number one thing that connects everyone. What's your story? How did you get into helping people make that transition from sports to success?
So people always ask me, why'd you start the company? I really, truly started the company for myself at 2 points in my life. I grew up in Massachusetts. I'm the oldest son of a Hall of Fame hockey coach. So I spent basically 24 years fully dedicated and focused on ice hockey. It was my identity, it was my purpose. And then one day I woke up and nobody wanted to pay me to do it. And I had to figure out like what was next. Two kind of takeaways from that experience was, number one, I shouldn't have waited till that morning to think about what I wanted to do next, right? I think it would have actually improved my experience of being a hockey player had I had some other pieces of my identity and things that I was learning about. But two, there was a nowhere for me to go to do some self-discovery, to do some career discovery, and then to do some career upskilling and get access to companies that understood the value of me being a 24-year elite athlete, right? So that's the first person I started the company for. The second person I started the company for is I tripped and fell into a career in sales. I spent 16 years in sales and sales leadership. So I spent a lot of time trying to identify and hire and train and retain the best possible sales professionals. And I had the most success when I focused on intangible characteristics and mindsets, because I think you can teach skills and you can teach knowledge. You can't teach someone how to think, and you can't teach someone to have a certain characteristic. So the idea behind Shift Group is we want to help as many athletes, and we also help veterans successfully transition into the sales profession. And then we want to help sales leaders in every industry get access to the right talent that has the intangibles and has the mindsets that we believe to be indicative of success. So that life experience is what led to Shift Group, and it's why I think, I'm so close to our customer base on both sides of our market, both the athletes and veterans we work with, as well as the companies that hire those people from us.
Well, I really appreciate you talking about the identity part of that. That really spoke to me, and I'm sure there are people who are listening who, whether it was sports or religion, whether it was academia, whatever it was, a lot of people wrap their identity into the thing that they want to become. I've worked a lot with the medical field, and in that space, once you make that decision at 18 years old, you're going to go to college to be a doctor. You're kind of set there. Not a lot of people get to 30 and go, I want to have a different shift in my life. I want a career change, right? You spent so much time, effort, energy, and identity. Talk to us a little bit about that moment when you realized your identity was no longer going to be what you had probably imagined for the most of your life, what your future was going to be. How did you come to terms with that? What was that like for you?
I would love to tell you that it was a moment. But again, like one of the reasons I started the company is because I struggled with it. Like
Mm,
it probably took me 2 or 3 years to like let go of the anger, the resentment of
wow.
like, and I was in a weird situation because like I said, I'm the oldest. My middle brother, when I retired from hockey, my middle brother was just getting into college and he was a stud. Like he was an all-American. He
Wow.
ended up going on playing the NHL, playing in the Olympics, like very,
Wow.
very, very unique and special talent. And meanwhile, I'm like, well, what the hell am I? Right? Who am I? So
Wow.
for
Yeah.
me, it came down to like dealing with I've been sober for 12 years, so I struggle with substance abuse to deal with some of the anxiety and depression that came out of that transition. And ultimately, I think the moment where I was like, oh my God, like I don't have to change who I am to be a professional was actually going to my brother's first NHL game and seeing the way he was carrying himself, how prepared he was, and how he was approaching the game. And I realized like, and I was already a salesperson at this point, but I realized like, here I am like bitching and moaning and feeling bad for myself that I'm not a professional athlete. But like, if I approach this career and get dialed in the way my brother's dialed into hockey, I can still be a millionaire. Like I can still get all the glory and all the fame and success that you get as an athlete, just in a different vertical.
Mhm.
And that was a big moment for me, right? It probably took another year or two before I put down the drinks and the drugs, but like that for me was like finally like the moment where I'm like I'm this is fine. I'm gonna be fine.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that, because many people who listen to the show know that although I've never personally dealt with it, one of my missions in my business is to reverse the direction of divorce, addiction, and suicide amongst business owners and their team members. And I know there's a lot of people listening to that who, in some way, can relate, even if it's not, say, alcohol or drugs, it's food, it's sex, it's whatever it might be. There's an addiction there, and we try to numb ourselves and our feelings for what we're not getting or what we're not being able to do. And I think we can all can relate to the jealousy factor of what the heck, how come they got anointed with that special ability? And I love the mindset of turning it around and realizing the skills that you did practice and focused on for 20 plus years of your life were the exact same skills in a different vertical that will help you be successful there. Everyone has those abilities. I mean, I'll just be totally authentic. As you were saying that, I was like, oh, yeah, there are other skills that I'm not totally using, that I use in my hobbies or I use in my performance life, that I'm not quite using in my business right now, that I can totally turn on. When you mentioned there weren't any real sources to go to when you were going through this crisis, and so therefore I'm assuming that's where, like, the only thing that was easiest was the alcohol and the drugs, like, to numb that. um what did other people do at that time for years of not having someone to turn to say, hey, what do I do now? What was it, what was available, if anything?
Well, I think like, if I went to a great college, liberal arts school, right? Which means certain things. The biggest thing it means is like, unless you want to be a doctor or a lawyer, there's not really like specific guidance, right? I happen to be a first generation college graduate, right? So I don't
Wow.
come from a family of people who have like gone to college and then gone on and done this. And because of hockey, I got to surround myself with a lot of people that came from multi-generational wealth and families who have been successful for a long time. So there was some exposure there. But I think like generally, if you don't have somebody like directly in your life and in your family that's been successful, it's not networking isn't necessarily natural, right? So like I think I kind of figured that out over time and started having conversations and started understanding like what was out there. You can get into finance. I also entered the job market in 2008, so that wasn't
Oh,
really like
wow.
a path
Yeah.
I wanted to take. So I think that's kind of what it comes down to is like your network is your net worth, and my
Mhm.
network was, I grew up blue collar, surrounded by a lot of blue collar people. Even to this day, my dad still gives me crap that I didn't go down the civil route and I don't have a pension someday to lean on, right? So, there's it's really
That's
about
so
getting
funny.
out of that comfort zone, getting out of that. If you don't have that network, going to find that network, right? That's kind of the option right now. I think like that's really it.
Yeah. So is that how you made that realization or the shift into sales? Was it just the only option? Like it's an interesting sales is a bunch of rejection, right?
Yes. Yeah.
You have to learn to almost embrace the rejection part of it. You
Mhm.
also have to embrace interrupting people. You have to embrace, helping people, all of those things, which I know that obviously sports is a team effort, but when it comes down to it, it's you on that ice have to perform your best. So it can be kind of selfish in some ways too. How did you make that? What was it that tipped you into sales? Who was the network that helped you get there?
It was through my hockey network.
Oh,
I was playing like men's league hockey at the time,
mhm.
and there was a guy on my team who drove like a sick car. He had like always had like nice watches and dressed well. And I was 24 years old. I'm like, I just asked him, like, what do you do for work? Right. And
Yeah.
he's like, oh, I'm in sales. And I'm like, really? Like, and obviously I had already known him. I'm like, this guy ain't that smart, right? Like, so like, and you don't have a lot of self-awareness and self-confidence at that age, especially when you just lost your entire purpose
Yeah.
like within a year. And that was kind of like my first like taste of like, okay, like I don't have to go be a doctor. I don't have to go be I didn't want to go do those things. Definitely didn't want to go back to school. So like that was kind of my first taste of like, oh, there's other ways that you can go make a lot of money, right? That I knew that was important to me, right?
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
by the way, that's important for if you want to get into sales, because like sales is the worst career in the world to make a mediocre salary. Like you said, you
Yeah,
get
that's true.
you get told no more than you get told yes.
Yeah.
There's a lot of like crappy administrative work that you have to do. And if you're not coin operated, I always tell people don't sign up for sales, man. It's not worth it.
It is. It's challenging. What was your initial feeling around sales? Because I feel like most people have some sort of uh energy, negative or positive around sales at the beginning. What was yours?
It's easy. Like it's what probably most of your listeners, when they close their eye, when you say the word sales and they close their eyes, it's the same image that they have as what I had. And it's a used car salesman.
Yes, isn't that funny?
100%. It's like high pressure tactics, lying, and
Yeah,
like pitching, right? Pitch me, pitch me,
right,
pitch me.
right.
That was what
Sell me
I,
this pin. Sell me this pin.
yes, yes, exactly. That's literally 100% what I thought sales was. 100%.
And how did that shift happen to realizing it was maybe not all that you thought of? Because I agree. I think most people, and the salesperson is so funny. Somehow we've all been conditioned that that's the go-to salesperson, right?
Yeah, I think like my first day when I got a job, my job I was cold collar, right? I was a, early career business
Wow.
development. They call it business development to make you feel, but you pick up the phone and like to your point, right? Like I call it the indignities of sales.
Mm,
Sales is you have to ask people for their attention, and at the end of like spending time with them, you have to ask them for their money, right? So there's these two bookends that are like really, really hard. And like that first experience of like asking for someone's attention, I've always been able to talk a dog off a meat wagon, like pretty good in a bar room. Like, all those types of things. So I thought I could get away with that. And what I quickly realized was like, I can't convince these people to spend time with my company unless I understand enough about them to explain why they should spend time with my company. So that's when I started to realize like, oh, it's not about like the pitch. It's not about lying to them. It's about understanding their world and showing them how we can make their world better and asking them questions to show them like their world isn't perfect, because nobody wants you to call their baby ugly. So you have to ask them questions to get them to admit that their baby's ugly, essentially.
Yeah.
So that's when I started to understand like sales is about solving problems. And in order to do that, you have to understand what type of problems might exist in this person's world that I'm going to call out of nowhere. They've never heard of me. They've never heard of my company. And what am I going to say to get their attention and be like, yeah, let's meet for 30 minutes? Because that was my job for, a year straight.
And what were you selling something you actually cared about? Were you selling like what were you selling?
No, I was selling. So I in college I was a sociology major with a minor in art history and sign language.
That's going to go really well. You can go far with that. I'm sure your dad's super proud. Like I could see where he wasn't concerned.
and I didn't own a computer, by the way, Dino. Oh. So when I got out of college, I got in.
This wasn't 1980. What were you doing?
No, I just like I'm not. I'm not a digital native, right? I can't use technology like a fifth limb like a lot of these kids can today. Yeah. It just wasn't there for me. But then I went and spent 16 years selling enterprise technology, meaning like, I'm not talking about computers. I'm talking about like servers, storage, switches, like enterprise IT infrastructure to the biggest companies in the world for 16 years. Was I passionate about those things when I first started? Absolutely not. I'm a big believer, like you don't follow your passion, you work for it. Right.
That's 100%. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and my purpose literally was like, I want to make a lot of money. Right. So how can I do that? I can get these people to buy this product, and ultimately you like get experience and you get knowledge and you learn like, oh, this product makes their life better because it saves them money. It saves them time. It drives growth, right? Like those are the things you learn. Yeah. But I certainly was not passionate about, I'll throw some technical words, virtualization and deduplication and all these technologies I was selling. Absolutely not. No.
Well, I love that you weren't and you said that part about, not only living your passion. I'm a huge fan of that. I think that we've created this false sense of direction in people's lives when it's like, if you're passionate about something, then that's what you should do. I have a saying that says passion doesn't equal mastery, but mastery always equals passion. And so when you learn about the thing and you actually get into it and you start being successful selling that thing that you didn't know anything about 6 months before, all of a sudden, I like this thing a lot and I create the passion around it. I'm making money. I'm supporting my family. I'm having a direction. I think most people don't, not most people, a lot of people don't get that in their life. What was your biggest hurdle moving on from that? Because obviously you took this and you said, oh, there's a path here for something else. Is that when you started looking at some of your colleagues, or
in terms of
in terms of people who are in the sports field and moving there and then realizing they could learn something new and learn something different? Or how did that shift, for lack of a better word, happen for you?
Yeah, for me, it was when I got like promoted a couple times, and now it was like, now I was in charge of like hiring people. And it was like, all right, JR, you're a sales leader. You have a quota of, simple numbers, $10 million. You got to go hire 5 people and they're going to be responsible for 2 million each. And you've got to hire the right person that you're going to trust to go and achieve that goal. And when you're given that, pressure, and I always say pressure is a privilege. When you're given that pressure, it forced me to think about like, okay, what type of human being am I gonna pay to help me get paid, right? Like, and when I thought about it, it was pretty simple for me. It was like, I need people that have these certain intangibles and this certain mindset, because then I can trust them to do the right thing when I'm not in the room. And when you have 5, 10, and I had upwards of hundreds of people working for me, I'm not going to be in the room most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So those things, those intangibles, those mindsets, those are not things you can teach somebody. And they're also not things that get developed with an onboarding, like a 2-week onboarding at a company, right?
Yeah.
Like these are things that take many, many years, even decades of habits and experiences. And I realized, because of my background, that those intangibles and mindsets are developed when you play sports or when you serve in the military. So that's where I focused most of my time. I felt like, and you're a dancer and performer. I also believe artists can have some of those intangibles because of the nature of that, that profession, right? So it's not, it's dangerous to say it's just athletes and veterans have those things, sure. but I'm confident that an athlete and a veteran, for the most part, is going to have those things, and I don't have to ask many questions about those things during the interview process.
Well, I think that's what's really interesting, is that you were able to look at your past history of what you went through and the characteristics that it takes after having gone through the process and getting the promotions, and then thinking, who can I rely on? And I think a lot of people would have gone, oh, where are some other salespeople? Where can I go find some other salespeople who are already, in the game? And here you're thinking, well, let me find people who I can bring into it. Number one, you're giving them another chance, another career, just like you did. Think not having your identity wrapped up in that one thing, or having it wrapped up into it and not knowing where to go. And then next, how can I utilize those skill sets? There's a great book called Be So Good They Can't Ignore You. And in the book, that's the point, is that you never know what things happen to you throughout your life that will ultimately culminate in your success when you never even saw that as the path. You probably weren't sitting there in the middle of hockey practices at 15 years old going, someday this will help me in sales. Someday my dad yelling at me and having to do the drills back and forth is going to be helping me close $1 million deals. Probably wouldn't think that.
No, you're right. 100%. Now this is a little not off topic. It's what you just mentioned. I'm curious to get your take on this.
Yeah.
What if I understood at 15 that were true?
Oh, right. That's really a great, yeah.
What type of difference would that make if a 15-year-old athlete understood that these experiences, this adversity, all this stuff, being on a team and working and playing with people that maybe you don't like, they're from a different background, their personality doesn't. What if I understood that was going to be meaningful for me 15, 30, 45 years down the road? What a difference that would make.
That when the ref makes a call you don't like or is unfair, when the game goes a certain direction that you didn't, when your partner or your teammate is injured and you have to feel, yeah, that's really cool. I hope you're creating that curriculum and that discipline for people right now, because that's brilliant.
I think that's like one of the future state goals, because I talked about how, like, the lesson I learned when hockey was over one night was like, man, I should have started this process a while back, right? It's partially that example we just used, but it's also like when your identity and purpose is one thing, and that one thing doesn't go well, you get cut from a team, you lose a game, you have a bad game, you get benched, your world is like over. You're like, oh my God, like I've put all my eggs in this basket. So like that's again, that's like kind of one of the things that we're developing now, is like trying to show these athletic organizations and coaches, hey, I know you think that you want your players 100% committed and focused on hockey. That's a huge mistake. And here's the data that proves that it's a huge mistake. That's why you just mentioned that's something that is a great example of why that's a huge mistake.
That's really cool. I love that you're doing that. I remember there's a story, I believe it's in the book, The Gap and the Gain, where they talk about a college football player who was very successful, and he got recruited. And in one of the interviews, he talked about how one of the guys asked him if football was his life. And he said, well, no, I mean, I enjoy it, but it's not my life. And people were dogging on him. ESPN was talking about, oh, you need to be committed all the way. And he's like, it's not that I'm not committed. It's just that I know that there's more outside. If football were to go away tomorrow, I'd still be okay. And I don't think a lot of people can do that because they don't have that mindset that you can give them. Whether it doesn't have to be sales, right? It can be
No,
anything, knowing
no,
that there's other opportunities with the skills you're learning now, how they're going to apply later on,
totally.
and giving them that vision. Let's talk about the veteran side of things too, because I think that's amazing. And in the same style of giving them a skill set that they can learn that can branch out beyond military when that doesn't pan out, or they decide to go out of military, or if they get hurt or injured or anything like that. How did that come to be a part of your passion mission?
Well, it was kind of the idea from the beginning. That's actually why I called it Shift Group, because I wanted to serve multiple populations. In the original, like the idea for the company's from like 2015. I look back at the deck that I built. I was on a flight to London for sales meetings to Canary Wharf, and I built this, like, it wasn't called Shift Group, but I built this like idea of this company. And the third bucket, it was athletes, veterans, and then, believe it or not, it was PhDs. Um, because only 17% of PhDs work in the career that they got their PhD in, which is like crazy to me.
Right.
We haven't expanded there yet, but veterans, for me, it was like, one, it's close to my heart. Both my grandfathers served. A lot of people from that generation served. Obviously, that percentage has gone down. Friends and family that I saw go through the transition that were like really dialed in soldiers, and then they lose that. And I mean, it's a well documented fact of like the suicide problem, the substance abuse problem that these veterans come back from combat and have. And the other reason why is because corporate America, a lot of big companies talk about their veteran programs, but like at the end of the day, you put a 40-year-old like Green Beret in front of a 25-year-old HR person, they don't get it. Like they don't. There's no way in the world that they understand what this person brings to their organization,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it's sad. It's sad. It's like you got this human being who's like sacrificed a lot, both themselves and their family, to protect the freedom that this 25-year-old HR person is using every day when they go on Twitter and talk crap about people, right?
Yep.
Or share their opinion about something. The
Right.
only reason that person can do it is because of these people who wear our country's colors and go fight the bad guy. So like, I just think, and I do like sincerely believe that the experience of the military training, being on a team, trying to get better at things, and like and like being accountable, they're very similar to athletes, very,
Yeah.
very similar. So it was a pretty organic kind of expansion for us.
Yeah, that's very true, right? There's so many similarities in the sports world and the military world. Even the desire to hit a mission, right? You have a certain goal or mission, you're moving towards that, and everything's about that mission. You mentioned earlier, if you have a $5 million sales quota or a $10 million sales quota, that's the mission. And you got to have people on your team who are willing to do whatever it takes to get there, and not just go, oh, it's 5, it's time for my latte,
Yeah.
I need to
Yeah.
go and do that. So yeah, that's very awesome. Can you tell us any type of examples of some of the people that you've been able to work with, and that kind of outcome of what's happened there?
So I'll do two examples, one from athletics and one from the veteran side. So like, you have college athletics now is big business, right? For all intents and purposes, if you're going to go play in the Power Five or a mid-major, you are essentially a professional athlete,
Yeah.
and you're getting recruited for your athletic talent for the most part. And when I say that, I mean like size, speed, those types of things, right? Obviously, you need to be good enough to get in the school, but ultimately, when that is over, you're typically going right back to where you grew up. And in a lot of cases, mine included, where you grew up, the people you grew up around are not going to be the best influences in the world. So I'm thinking of a specific kid who came through our program, grew up in a bad part of Virginia, went on to play at one of the big Virginia schools, and we got him a job. And he said to me, and it was like probably the best thing I ever heard. It's better than the revenue. It's better than everything else we do. He's like, dude, you didn't just change my life, JR. You changed my family's life. Like, if I hadn't met Shift Group, I'd be doing what, my uncles are doing or my cousins are doing, which is not legal, right? Like,
Yeah.
and that's like a big deal to me, right? Like and it's unfortunate that we have to exist for that to happen, right? You'd
Right.
think the kid went to a great school and got a degree and he should be fine, but this is a secondary thought because of the way that these universities are measured and stuff like that.
Well, it's a generational shift that you are making, right?
Totally.
And that's so my company, my business company is called Our Ripple Effect. And the reason why I came up with that is that I really do believe every single human being on the planet can cause a ripple for good or ill. And so companies like yours, which are helping people see a future beyond their current present of what they can see, causes that ripple effect. And you'll never know. Like, I don't know, I'm sure you sit with this sometimes, I hope you do, is that I know we just met, but obviously through a story like that, and I'm sure dozens or hundreds of stories you have like that, there's a ripple effect. You